Hello, my name is Christopher Newcomer. Today in my symposium, I will be talking about the identity crisis. My three main topics will be how Christians react to the LGBTQ community and how Christians should react, and how the LGBTQ community reacts to Christian views. As Christians, we believe that God created us in His image and that a person is valuable because of that, and that we deserve love and respect. In Genesis 1:27, we see that God created man in His own image. We also believe that there are only two genders. We see that in the second half of Genesis 1:27. In the image of God, He created him. Male and female, He created them. So, how do we reconcile these beliefs with the LGBTQ community? Those who identify as LGBTQ may face condemnation and rejection by Christians. This, however, might not exhibit the love of God that we are intended to believe for everyone. Matthew 22:37 through 39 says, "The second is unto it, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself." Instead of condemning them, we should remember that they are in sin like us, and we should pray for those who identify as the LGBTQ. We must know that the beliefs and lifestyle of the LGBTQ population contradicts ours as Christians. This does not prevent us from peaceful coexistence and or having mutual respect for each other. We can disagree in our beliefs, but that should not make us hostile or make us hate one another. This means that regardless of a person's sexual orientation or gender identity, we should make the church open for them, but not to encourage their sin, but to humbly help them live apart from their sin. Creating safe spaces, or in other words, welcoming these people to church, is something all Christians should work on, while still maintaining that men and women are the only two genders, but not overly pressing them on the fact that they are wrong, because that would make them want to leave the church or hate Christians as Christians for their own beliefs. We should welcome them and teach them that they are living life in sin, just like every one of us. The Bible states that marriage is only between men and women, and they are to fulfill the creation mandate to fulfill the earth and multiply. Genesis 2:24 says, "Therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh." Genesis 1:28 says, "And God blessed them, and God said unto them, Be fruitful, multiply, and replenish the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth." With these verses, we know that the lifestyle of the LGBTQ is a departure from God's commands. Additionally, some Christians believe that the promotion of LGBTQ rights and acceptance in society is a sign of moral decay and societal decline. They argue that the normalization of homosexuality and other non-binary gender identities undermines the traditional family structure and leads to the breakdown of society. They also believe that the acceptance of homosexuality and other non-binary, non-heterosexual orientations will result in the normalizations of other forms of sexual deviancies that will ultimately lead to the destruction of society. We see this a lot in life today, as we see that there are over hundreds of genders that people are starting to identify as, and some of them are becoming crazy. If y'all have heard of any of them, they're absolutely wild. Romans 12:2 says, "Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testifying you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect." 1 Peter 1:14 says, "As obedient children, do not be conformed to the passions of your former ignorance." In this verse, it says former ignorance. I want to put emphasis on that because once you are saved, it should set you apart from the world, and your former self, which is being called ignorant in this verse, you should live apart from that, and that's what happens when you are saved. You live apart from the ignorance of your former self. One interesting topic is how the LGBTQ reacts towards Christian views. Since they don't accept what we believe, they often become hostile, verbally abusive, or even violent when they hear a Christian speaking. One example of their violence towards Christians' views is the shooting that took place in Nashville, Tennessee. As many of you know, the shooter identifies as a transgender woman. The shooter shot and killed 3 kids and 3 adults. Something that stood out to me was how the news and authorities and how a lot of people reacted to it was that they took the side of the transgender shooter. They often defended him and said that we're putting emphasis on this shooting because it was a transgender shooting. President Joe Biden, in response to the shooting, said, "Transgender Americans shape our nation's soul, proudly serving in the military, curing deadly diseases, holding elective office, running thriving businesses, fighting for justice, raising families, and much more." He took the side of the transgender for killing all these, the 3 children, the 3 adults. That should show you how corrupt our government is. This is just one example of the many examples of the corruption of our government, like I just stated. The violent nature of some LGBTQ members that they have towards Christians is a sign of their hatred towards God and Christianity. You have probably seen more examples of this when there are public Christian speakers who are talking about the Bible and how they are often harassed or even assaulted by the LGBTQ community. Some percentages are around 60% of adults in the US say that sex is determined at birth, and 40% say that it can be defined differently. Most Republicans and Republican-leaning independents say that some gender is determined by sex at birth. That is 86%. In contrast, most Democrat and Democratic leaners, 61% say gender can be different. Gender can differ from their sex at birth. In conclusion, navigating the intersection between Christianity and the LGBTQ community is a complex issue that requires compassion, understanding, and respect. As Christians, we should seek to love and accept all people while upholding our beliefs and values. Many Christians view the LGBTQ lifestyle as a deviation from God's plan for human sexuality and a threat to traditional family values. They argue that the promotion of LGBTQ rights and acceptance in society is a sign of moral decay and social decline, which will ultimately lead to the destruction of society. I also want to add that we need to bring these people in the church and not push them away. But we also need to let them know that they're not living in their own sin alone. We all struggle in our own sin, and their sin is just like us, but we need to get them in the church and not reject them. Thank you.